So this one is by popular request. I've gotten asked a ton, Nate, what do I read? Look at the bookshelf. What do I read in the age of AI? How do I know I'm reading the right things? It feels like reading is becoming increasingly irrelevant. The Wall Street Journal came out this week with an assessment that basically suggests we are rotting out knowledge in the knowledge economy because AI is repeating knowledge and regurgitating knowledge and recalibrating knowledge, and there's no actual new knowledge being produced because people are just asking for summaries. I don't think that's actually true. I think that's panic inducing, but I do think we need to talk about it. And I want to talk about it in the context of how we read in the age of AI. And I think this is a big, big deal because even if you don't read books, right? Maybe you're on a Kindle, maybe you are reading articles, you are still consuming content. Maybe you're on this video. I think if you are listening to this video, it's like an Audible book. It counts as reading. Maybe you're feeling like that's being generous, but it's true. It counts as reading. I want to suggest that the way we read is not well enough documented, and that's part of why we're suffering, is we don't know how to be readers in an age when we're drowning in information, because reading evolved for a selective information age. We learned to read because we needed to remember things, and remembering by writing down works pretty well. And to retrieve it, you have to read it, right? That was the fundamental idea. That's why a lot of the initial records we have for writing are commerce records. You are trying to read and understand. Court documents are also very early examples of writing. You are trying to read, understand, remember. We have since evolved, and we read for all kinds of reasons. In the age of AI, I want to give you 3 ways that I think we read and learn. And I want to give you frameworks for how you think about this when you have, like, let's assume you have an intelligent AI counterpart, a buddy, a ChatGPT in your pocket that you're reading with. How do you use that well so you are not just wasting your time and information goes in one ear and it goes out the other ear? So here are the 3 frames that we're going to walk through. Number 1, I think it's the lightest, is what I would call awareness reading. So that's the idea that you just need to catch up on the information of the day. This might be the person who is scrolling X. This might be the person who is trying to understand what's in the news. This might be the person who is just skimming through a book in the bookstore, or maybe skimming through a book that they're going to get a test on, and they just need to have enough awareness to pass the test, right? That's that lightest layer. The second layer is what I call information retrieval. You also hear it called domain completion. It actually maps pretty well to a lot of what we do with Google. I think it's underthought of that we Google as readers. In a sense, Google is a form of reading because we're trying to go out and retrieve information that has been written down somewhere. That is the act of reading. And when we do a lot of our sort of intermediate level reading, what we're really doing is we're saying fact A is in a book. Fact A is on a web page. I need to go and get it and retrieve it for a particular purpose. I'm going to use it. I'm going to repurpose it to borrow token architecture. I'm going to stick the token in and I'm going to produce a new token, right? That's retrieval reading. And then 3, and this is the one that people get like lots of big feelings about. It's what there's not been a good name for it. I'm calling it connectome reading. Other people call it deep reading. I like to call it connectome reading because my thinking is that, our brains are plastic. Our brains are forming all the time, evolving all the time, pruning pathways, etc. We are deepening the connectome in our brains when we read deeply. And this is the kind of reading that teachers get very excited about. This is the kind of reading that everyone worries is disappearing. But it's only one part of this larger reading landscape. And by all accounts, it's a very expensive form of reading from an energy perspective. I was doing some research on sort of reading and the science of reading. Apparently, if you're doing that kind of deep reading, you are burning a tremendous amount of glucose in your brain because you're trying to process so much. And so as much as we may try and lament and sort of put the responsibility for reading more on ourselves or on our peers, maybe part of it is recognizing that this is a very energetically expensive task, and we need to make the choice to use that reading skill where it matters the most. And that is the part that I would argue has gotten harder in the age of AI, and that's what I want to address. I think that we need better tools for filtering and simplifying reading tasks so that we can truly build understanding at the levels we need. We can build awareness where we need it. We can retrieve information where we need it, which also, by the way, I would argue LLMs are retrieval reading. You're getting answers. There's a popular term now called answer engine optimization because people needed an answer for search engine optimization in the age of AI, so they made it up. But the idea is the same, right? You're doing retrieval and you're coming back with information. And then there's connectome reading, right? The 3. I want to suggest that there is a way for us to understand in advance what kinds of books we need to dig into in a connectome sense, in a deep reading sense, what kinds we can just skim, what kinds we can do some retrieval on. And it has never been more possible to do that kind of learning across multiple book types, multiple retrieval types using the assistance of AI. Yes, unlike the Wall Street Journal, I do not think that AI is bad for reading. I think people who passively use AI are bad readers. And that's a different thing. So what do I mean here? Let's go to a few examples. Let's, for example, look at AI literacy fundamentals. The author is Ben Jones, and the pitch is pretty simple, right? If you're overwhelmed by AI, this will help you, right? You can join in the conversation, etc. It is clearly a beginner grade book. I would say, just looking at it, and this is, again, I want to talk this through so you get this into your head. This is an example of a book where there are lots of facts that you want to retrieve and you want to understand. This is a good example of a book where you should have a copy and then you should read with AI as an information retrieval system. So you should say, this is my current level of fluency in a prompt. This is the book that I'm holding and looking at. By the way, I don't advocate not getting the book. I think you should get the book. And I want to read only the sections that I'm missing on. Maybe I want to read about how token architecture works. Maybe I want to read about how next token prediction works. Maybe I just want to understand how AI conversations happen in a chatbot. That's the level I'm at. You can then go in and talk to the AI and say, what parts of the book do I need to read? What elements of this book speak to that knowledge gap, the thing I'm trying to learn? And maybe what other books do you recommend? And by the way, I tested this on AI to see how much hallucination I would get as far as made up books. It is remarkably accurate. I was working with Perplexity for this. I find that Perplexity is a great search engine here. I only had one instance in about 30 books where Perplexity made up the book entirely. And I mean, is that great, right? You have to check it. I caught it. But the other 29 books were legit and they were good books and there was a great find. It saved me a ton of time to kind of sort of pulling the list together and making sure that I had a fluent understanding, because as much as I read, there's books coming out on AI all the time and I wanted that broad stroke view. So I think AI literacy fundamentals is a good example of the kind of retrieval motion I'm talking about where you need to acquire new facts. Let's talk about something where I think you have a different kind of reading. Let's talk about co-intelligence, living and working with AI. It's a bestseller by Ethan Mollick. People have heard about it. As someone who has read that book is literally over here on my shelf. I think that benefits more from Connectome Reading. I think that's an example of a book you should read end to end because the narrative builds over time. You may not have a paper book, maybe it's on the Kindle, but you should read it and you should let it sink in. The good news is this particular book is written very clearly. It's easy to understand and digest. As much as you're doing Connectome Reading, it's not complex and hard to read. Now, an example of awareness reading, I actually think a fantastic example of awareness reading is the I talked about at the beginning of this video, the one that talks about knowledge rot. I think you just need to be aware of it. It's a great example of something that, frankly, Perplexity could summarize for you and just let you know what the state of the conversation is. It is not something you need to spend time digging into because, frankly, the level of effort and investment by the authors in a newspaper article is something that varies a lot, and you have to use your judgment about whether there's something new and noteworthy there from an AI perspective that is going to get you value for the time you're putting in to read that article end to end. And I can sort of hear and feel the journalists that might be listening to this sort of having heart palpitations because like that feels like it disintermediates the journalist and the print experience a little bit. I love good journalism. I think there's a place for good journalism. And I've been pretty honest about the fact that the number of good articles that deeply understand artificial intelligence, I can count them on like one hand. And I think that's a larger issue that I would love to see addressed. And I'd love to see a larger journalistic conversation about better quality newspaper articles. But I got to be honest about where we are. I think a lot of the articles that I see are not well enough researched to deserve deep reading at this time. And so I think they go in the awareness bucket. So when you think about it that way, my thesis is that this dramatically simplifies the whole problem. I think if we think of knowledge rot as a problem and we obsess over the gap, the so-called rot in the space, we're focusing on the wrong thing. I think we should instead focus on reading as a skill, recognize that reading is a skill issue that needs to be updated for the age of AI, and that the primary way it gets updated is by figuring out how to work with this new co-intelligence, to borrow Ethan's phrase, to read well, to read in a way that we remember, to save room for deep reading where it matters. And I think if we think about it as, wow, AI is enabling us to produce so many more tokens than we had before, therefore our filtering problem is really the issue, that simplifies a lot of this discourse, because then it's really not our fault. Like, if you think about it, this is analogous to the job market situation where, as most people who are in the job market know, we are in a world where recruiters are snowed under with resumes that have been published, prepared by AI. It's a terrible experience for the applicants because the applicants can't get any attention because there's so many perfect resumes now. It's a terrible experience for the recruiters and for HR because they can't figure out how to sift for quality anymore, and the whole system has broken down. In that world, AI producing tokens has led to a crisis of sifting, and businesses are reading candidates, quote unquote, by bringing them on site, by doing anything they can to get an actual candidate experience. Some of them are trying AI interviews, etc. In the same way, we need to get aggressive about sifting for quality information. And so part of what I'm doing by sort of building this book list is I want to have a source for quality AI information. And some of it will be retrieval, and some of it will be introductory and for beginners, and some of it's going to be for like advanced users as well. Like one of the advanced ones that I absolutely love, it's from Stripe Press, is The Art of Doing Science and Engineering. It is not directly about AI. It is a fantastic book. It's by Richard W. Hamming. And if you are anywhere in the technical space, I would recommend it. It helps you understand how innovation happens in technical spaces. And I think it's a highly relevant foundational text. So there's going to be sort of books like that as well. Please, please, please do not listen to the people who tell you that the problem is information rot per se, because if you believe that, you are going to get into a position where you think there's nothing you can do about it. The problem is not information rot per se. The problem is that we need new skills in a world where we have artificial intelligence right next to us all the time. I think one of the key skills is learning when to read for retrieval, when to read for awareness, when to read deeply for connectome reading. The other key skill is going to be learning when and how to put out what we actually think into the world. I'll give you an example. This is a work of passion for me. I care about reading. Are you surprised? Look at these books. I care passionately about reading and supporting readers, supporting next generation readers. I see the anecdotes coming out of the education system where people are struggling to get students engaged on reading, where people in high school and above are saying that students are phoning it in and just using AI to sort of put the essays in, and the educational system that was predicated on the idea that people needed to write essays, that people needed to demonstrate their understanding by producing words, is just not working anymore. I think that the way back is reigniting passion for deeply understanding a subject, reigniting curiosity, understanding that there is too much information to process and that rote assignments were never that effective anyway. And that we need to challenge people to grapple deeply with things to get them to read. And if you want to learn about AI, your best asset, ironically, despite this being about how you use AI to read better, your best asset is still your curiosity. Your best asset is still your passion for artificial intelligence and the subject matter. That matters. That matters a lot. And I want to remind you of that because that is empowering. If you are curious, if you are passionate about something, not only will you read better, not only will you learn better, you're going to find your voice. You're going to find something you want to say into the world. Maybe it's about AI. Maybe it's about science and engineering like Richard Hamming did. Maybe it's about something else entirely. But that voice, that desire to speak back, in my experience, only comes when you are reading enough to prime the pumps, when you are thinking and interacting with the world and taking in information and meditating on it deeply and letting it reprocess inside you. I don't think the token architecture metaphor works very well for people. I know we use it a lot because that's the predominant tech hype cycle of our age. What we do with information is deeper than that. The way we reprocess, the way we mix it, it's not something that is easily translatable in machine terms. And that magical compost pile is where the best authors have always gotten their stuff. It is where people who come up with ideas to build a business get their stuff, except for them, they're reading customers. They are reading the market. They are reading pain points, and they're thinking about it and obsessing over it and studying it. We need that kind of passion in order to put something back in order to have the skill to fight the knowledge rot, to have the skill to say something new. I don't think that that's hopeless. In fact, I have never been more bullish on it because I think that properly used, AI can help us to say new things. I'm going to give you an example here. I am, as a project, as a brain stretching project, working on learning Swedish. I'm not good at it. Please, no one in my comments come for me and say, tell me about your Swedish skills. They're terrible. I'm learning. But I have a background, not just in English, but also in Indonesian. There is nothing in the literature on learning English or learning Swedish if you know Indonesian already. I could not find anything. And so I worked with GPT-5 Pro and I put together a way of thinking about Swedish grammar that makes sense to someone who knows Indonesian, and a way sort of to walk into learning Swedish. As far as I know, that hasn't been done before. I'm sure that could be done by someone with a linguistics degree who knows Swedish and Indonesian. I don't pretend that that's something that's like completely impossible for people, but it hasn't been done. And GPT-5 Pro enabled me, a humble person who is not a linguist, to just go and do it. That is an example of passion working with an AI to put something out that I can understand and actually like gain a skill set on. It is using AI to be active. And so I want to challenge you, don't be afraid to work with AI to build new and active things. It is worth trying. It is worth taking a prompt and saying, hey, can you please help me with this? And I will say the advanced reasoning models do a lot better. In particular, if you were sort of inspired by this and you're like, what is the takeaway here? I don't do Swedish, but is there something I can learn? Think about it as GPT-5 and other advanced reasoning models are very, very good at stitching between domains. And so if you have existing knowledge domains, you will have cracks in those knowledge domains. I described one between Indonesian and Swedish linguistics. No one had bridged that before. It knows all the domains well enough that it can establish a bridge, or at least the start of a bridge, a scaffold of a bridge between those domains that ends up being a new connector in the human knowledge set. That's really exciting. And so what you should do is, if you're passionate about something and you cover multiple domains, be a good reader, work with AI, see if you can't connect those domains together in a way that's interesting and novel. This is not the same thing as the people working with AI and claiming they are coming up with novel physics when they are not physicists. That is a very different thing. I would say that is trying to say that the reasoning models can advance the edges of human domain experience beyond what PhD physicists can do. That is, at best, unproven. At best. And there are articles sort of from physicists explaining why that's challenging. You have similar things with mathematics. I think physics just gets more attention because people watch Star Trek a lot. So where does that leave us? Please be a careful reader. Please filter what you want to read. Don't blame yourself if you feel overwhelmed. Figure out what your pathway is for reading and jump into it. I'm going to sort of put something up on the Substack with like learning pathways for different goals in AI, but really it's not about AI. It is about AI, but like use it to learn anything in the age when you have a lot of information to choose from. And then when you're passionate about something, think about ways that you can actually put your voice back out there. And maybe it's AI assisted, like I talked about with GPT-5 Pro and Indonesian and Swedish, and maybe it's not. Maybe you have the voice inside and you already know. An example of that one, as far as I know, I came up with the sort of retrieval awareness, deep reading thing. I don't know if other people have done it. It certainly didn't come from AI. It came from me arguing with AI and saying, you're wrong. I think this is the way we should categorize it. Out of my own head, because I had passion for it, because I care about reading. Learn, put something out there. We can beat knowledge rot together.